Today we're going to look at temptation. Boy, this is a subject that, as we hear James addressing these believers that are under these trials, as we've been discussing, he talks about the temptations that they would face. And I don't know, in my life, when I think back on different trials, heavy periods of testing and trials in my life, I can vividly remember the temptations that came along with that. So many temptations to doubt God, to turn my back on Him, to question Him, to be angry at Him, to blame Him, to blame others, just to fall into a deep funk, where I just basically give up and just say, there's no hope here. Those are all such temptations for us. I laugh sometimes in ministry. I quit 1,000 times sometimes, and you quit and you just get right back up. But we're not talking about just those easy feelings that kind of come and go, but we're talking about these desperate moments when we just don't think we can do this anymore. And maybe you've been there. Maybe you're there right now, where you're like, you know what? I don't know if I can do this anymore. I don't know if I can endure under this anymore. I've had enough. I have reached the end here. And boy, at that point, the devil is so quick to whisper in our ears, and he's so quick to tell us lies. He's so quick to cause us to believe things that are not true at all, but from our struggling perspective on life, from our depression or our discouragement, or from our twisted thinking, we can say, you know what, that sounds about right. That sounds about right. And so James addresses that today, because he wants these people to be clear where temptation comes from and where it does not come from. And boy, for you and I, this is super important, because we do face temptations, not only in moments of trials, when we're weakest, but we also face temptation every single day in the world that we are in. And as we look at that, where do these temptations come from? And so James is gonna quickly explain to us where they come from. And he's going to tell us in verse 13, let no one say when he is tempted, I am being tempted by God. For God cannot be tempted by evil, and He Himself does not tempt anyone. So boy, you couldn't have it any clearer than that, right? James just lays it out for him, and he says, look, when you're tempted, don't you dare catch yourself thinking or saying to yourself in any way, I'm tempted. God is tempting me. God is testing me, because God doesn't tempt anyone. He doesn't tempt anyone. And boy, he wants them to understand this so much, that for God cannot be tempted by evil, first of all. So his very character, he cannot be tempted by the evil. But beyond that, he also wants us to understand that in his very character, he does not tempt anyone to do evil. So there's these two aspects to the character of God that James reveals to us here, and he reminds us of in this passage. God himself cannot commit evil. Therefore, because he's pure and he's completely holy, and so he cannot be tempted by evil. And he does not tempt anyone. If he were to tempt you and I to be evil, he would be evil himself. And this is against the character of God. So he says, no, James wants us to understand this. But then he goes on, because he wants us to get this. And so he says this. But each one, so now he's going to explain then, if God doesn't tempt us, how are we tempted? Who does tempt us? Where does this come from? He says, but each one is tempted when he is carried away and enticed by his. If you're following along with me, you might want to circle, red, underline, highlight, do whatever you need to do, by his own lust. Wow. Now wait a minute. What did I just say? I'm tempted when I am carried away, this carried away picture, and I'm enticed by my own lust. Now, many times when we think of lust, we immediately go to sexual lust. We go to sexual impurities. But this word has a much bigger picture in it than just a sexual lust of sorts. But it has the idea of, if I lust for anything, the cravings, the desires that I have that would not be good for me, that would not be holy, that would not be pure, that would not be just, that would not be right. These are the things that he's focusing in on. And he says, do you know who tempts me? I tempt me. And how do I tempt myself? Well, first of all, he gives us steps. So I don't want you to miss this. We're carried away. This word carried away is the idea of being drawn away. It's where we would get our word lured from. You know, now some of you are maybe you're great fishermen. I know a few people who just love to fish. I like to fish, but I like to catch fish. Okay, and there's a big difference in that. But I know a little bit about a lure, and so a lure, what is that? Well, it's this enticing worm or an enticing cricket, or it's an enticing lure that the fish are going to want. And boy, you cast that out in the water, you let that thing go down, and then if you're really good, you're going to jiggle and wiggle that line just like you need to. You're going to bring it in just at the right speed, and that little lure is going to look and imitate and look just like the very heart's desire of that fish. But the problem is, you and I both know the end result of that. That fish buys it, and he is drawn. He's carried away. But he goes beyond that, because it's one thing to swim along behind a lure and go, you know what, that looks pretty good. But then he's enticed. So it takes us a little bit. Now this word is where we use our word excitement. Now he's like excited. He's like, oh my word, this is awesome. There is exactly what I want. Man, look at it. Whoo, I gotta have that. Whoo. Big bite. And we understand that before the fish can even get that thing, and probably before it even dawns on that fish that this is not what I thought it was, a good fisherman will set that hook. And that hook will catch in the side of that fish's jaw. And now the hook is set. And that fish can fight. Now sometimes they get away, but man, a lot of times those fish can fight. The harder they fight, the deeper the hook is set. And they can try to get away, but it's too late. They've been lured, they've been enticed, and now they're hooked. And James says, this is what it looks like to be tempted. These are the steps of temptation. And then what happens? All right, here's what I know. The bait is dangled by Satan, no question. There's so many things in our world out there where the bait is dangled for us, right? Whatever that might be. Yes, we can think about for men it could be a billboard or a movie or other things, but for women it's also some of these very same things. As we are tempted, it could be Amazon for, you know what I'm saying? It could just be that, wow, I just want to buy one more thing, and man, I'm just drawn into that, and now I'm spending more than I should, and all of these things can create great temptation for us. And so what happens here, the devil may dangle the bait, but that's all he can do. And you got to get this, okay, because this is so important. The devil can dangle the bait, but that's all he can do. I'm the one who buys it, and I'm the one who bites it. All the devil can do is dangle the bait. And man, when this clicked in my brain, that the devil doesn't make me do anything. You know, I get discouraged sometimes when I hear people talk about Satan as if he is in control of their lives, and they absolutely have no power, no ability, and yet they claim to be followers of Jesus Christ. I have heard him blamed for ruining events. I have heard him blamed for everything in the world. But whoa, wait a minute. Let's go back a little bit. Let's get our doctrine right a little bit here when it comes to this. The devil can dangle the bait on things. But you know what? It's me. I'm the one who's Lord. I'm the one who gets excited about this. I'm the one who takes the bait, and I'm the one who gets caught. And I'm the one who falls into this deep place. And so, boy, James is wanting them to understand this is so important for us, because there's a pattern then to the destruction. Once I'm hooked, listen to what happens. He says, then when lust has conceived, wow, it gives birth to sin. And when sin is accomplished, it brings forth death. Do not be deceived, my beloved brethren. Every good thing and every perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shifting shadow. In the exercise of his will, he brought us forth by the word of truth, so that we would be a kind of firstfruits among his creatures. Now let's unpack this real quick as we close up here and get these thoughts so that we understand them clearly. So we understand, first of all, that God He is not evil. He cannot do evil, therefore He cannot be the tempter. He is not the one who dangles the bait in front of us. We need to understand that. But we also understand that the devil can only dangle the bait in front of us. He cannot force us to do anything. It would be us that is lured. It'll be us that is excited and enticed over that sinful thing. And as James rolls this out for us, he says, boy, here's the deal as it falls itself out for us. He says the birth of this whole thing is that as my desires get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, then what happens for me? Lust conceives. I let my mind go with it. I think about what it would be like to do this. It gets bigger and bigger, and then what happens? I get excited about it. And I take it, and what happens when I do that? Sin is conceived. And sin, the minute it's birthed, brings forth death. Sin has no ending but death. None. Destruction of our lives, not only here in a sense of our emotional and spiritual health and our physical health, as the devil would do nothing more than destroy our lives, but in a greater sense, it's in our eternal life. His goal, destroy it all. He is the great deceiver. He's the great destroyer of lives. But you and I as believers, we need to understand who He is. We recognize Him for who He is. We get armed with the armor of God. And I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. Flee. The Bible says, man, when you're in front of a temptation, run. Because what happens if I don't run? Same thing that happens to the fish. He gets lured. He gets excited. He takes the bait. He gets hooked. And he's a trophy on somebody's wall. And you and I could be in that same place. But here's the good part that James leaves us with. He doesn't leave us in this depths of despair. He said, here's the thing. When it comes to the character of God, all good things come from Him. The good gifts, they come from God. So as you're trying to peer through the fog of your trial, understand that when you get tempted in the middle of your difficulties, when you're tempted in these hard places, that is not of God. God is the one who brings the good. And so you got to be watching out for Him, because He is the Father who brings these things. Boy, it just laid out. He's the Father of light, not the Father of darkness. He lays it out for us. And He's consistent. There's no variation. There's no shadow of turning. Boy, this is so powerful. So God is never the source of evil or the source of our temptation. He is the good Father, always. And man, He has loved us. He died for us. He rose again for us. And so I want you to remember, wow, this is some big stuff right here. When you get into that temptation point, you need to wake up. And you say, whoa, wait a minute. That looks enticing. It looks good. But it's a trick. And in the end, there's only death there. In the end, there's only destruction there. And I need to move, and I need to go the other way and trust God to bring the good. There's never a shortcut. Never a shortcut to the goodness of God. Sometimes the paths are long. Sometimes they go through trials. Sometimes they're hard climbs. Sometimes they're deep valleys. But in the end, God promises. It's back to that faith thing. Do I believe Him? Do I understand who He is and who He's not? Do I understand the one who is tempting me and who desires to destroy my soul and the souls of those around me? And if He can't get to them, He'll get to them through my destruction. Dealing with some destruction today in your own life, some temptation. Maybe you find yourself in the middle, you're hooked. I want you to know that God is the one who can get us unhooked. He is the one who can redeem the brokenness. He is the one who can correct that, because He is the good Father. Turn to Him today.